The Prix Galien is a welcome initiative to stimulate creative research and promote excellence. Barack Obama. The Galien Awards ceremony is considered the equivalent of the Oscars night for the innovators in the labs and awards every year the best pharmaceutical product, the best biotechnology product, the best medical technology, best digital health, best incubator accelerator, best startup.
This is the right event, on the right issue, at the right time.
I thank His Excellency, the President, for bringing Prix Galien to Africa, and I look forward to the day when we will celebrate an African winner of the Prix Galien.
I'm particularly grateful to receive this award.
The awards are among the highest honors in science and commerce because they lead to improvement in the human condition.
The Prix Galien Awards recognize the world's brightest minds and most innovative companies. They are a true celebration of the hard work required to produce life-changing interventions.
That is what makes us optimistic about the future.
Congratulations to all of you.
Make a difference. Join the Galien Foundation.
Welcome to the Galien Foundation Week of Innovation webinars here in New York. We have colleagues joining us from around the world, and let me briefly introduce them. And before I do that, let me set the objective. The objective this week is to provide additional content and background for our largest annual event, the Prix Galien USA Awards, to be held this Thursday here in New York, in conjunction with our annual Galien Forum of speakers representing top scientific experts and leaders in global health. Representing Humor and delighted to be here and sponsoring the events, we look forward to the next hour or so where we will hear from the nominees that are presenting today. The webinar series have given our nominees for Best Pharmaceutical, Best Biotech, Best MedTech, Best Digital Health Solution, and also then the Best Startup Accelerator Incubator, a great deal of visibility in describing their journey of medical discovery. And this year's Galien Awards, USA Awards, has a record 147 nominees for the 6 categories from 126 companies, covering 15 diverse therapeutic areas, ranging from cancer, cardiology, and neurosciences to infectious and very rare genetic diseases and vaccines. Many of these conditions would benefit from digital solutions that help patients manage their condition. And we'll be looking closely at the products of all 5 categories throughout the week. Today's webinar is going to be focused on the Best Digital Health category, which is our focus today. And we'll be holding a total of 2 webinars to represent the products in this important field. But in particular today, over the next hour or so, is devoted to nominees in the clinical trial management and wellness care. And what we will cover today relates to this central question. In what way can these new digital technologies contribute to better outcomes for patients at less cost to overburden health systems? And there will be time for question and answers, so please do make sure that you answer the Q&A, use the Q&A function and answer your questions there. Now, let us move us right to our discussion. I'll start by introducing the 4 nominees, their scientific clinical representatives who are joining us here for the webinar this afternoon. And in no particular order, these are Satya Illumilai, President and CEO of Ada Health, and their nominated product is MouthLab Vital Signs Monitoring System, which uses breath and saliva-based biosensors to help support effective interventions for respiratory, cardiovascular, and oncology conditions. Then I've got John Martin, who's the Chief Medical Officer of Butterfly Network, and their nominated product is Butterfly IQ Plus, an ultrasound on a chip technology that makes standard medical imaging screens more accessible and affordable for patients. Thirdly, we have Francois Henry Boissel, co-founder and CEO of Nova Discovery, And their nominated product is Ginkgo, a clinical trial simulation software to beta test trial designs. And then finally, Chrissa McFarlane, Chief Executive Officer of Patientry, and their product, Patientry, is an app to democratize and provide actionable insights from health data in a way that incentivizes individuals to control their own personal health outcomes. What a fantastic group of individuals, and we look forward to the discussion today. And there is an accessible link to a 100-word statement submitted by the companies on each of the nominated products, which you'll be able to view throughout the webcast. So let me start by asking each of you an opening question for you to then open up. So why don't I start with Satya? Satya, why did your company choose to focus on the disease state and indication associated with this new digital technology? And in what ways did the product represent a therapeutic breakthrough, and how significant was the level of unmet medical need?
Thanks, Harpreet. Really appreciate the opportunity. I'm Satya, founder and CEO of ADAR Health. I started this company primarily to help my mom, who's suffering from chronic kidney disease. She had diabetes and hypertension for over 15 years. And due to lack of insights, periodic monitoring, diet, ineffective management, she ended up developing chronic kidney disease. Today, as a caregiver, it's really brutal to actually measure every drop of water and every spoon of salt for her diet. And oftentimes she gets hospitalized due to fluid overload or edema. And more importantly, her quality of life significantly suffers. But she's not alone. Nearly 700 million patients in the US or around the world actually have chronic kidney disease, and the burden falls disproportionately on underprivileged or socially disadvantaged and vulnerable groups. There are no screening tools available today for early diagnosis. There are tons of money put into diabetes and hypertension, but nobody's really looking into the downstream impact of these conditions, especially CKD, because the healthcare system makes people feel lonely and disempower them, and sometimes may even contribute to their decline in health. So, which is why at ADAR, we developed a value-based kidney care solution that is more innovative in terms of helping providers and payers to monitor and manage patients with chronic kidney disease through a program what we call Renovate. It's a digital medicine program which offers a revolutionary medical device, which is FDA cleared, CE mark approved. This is our device. It's more like a handheld device. It's like a breathalyzer. The user breathes into the device for 30 seconds. At the end of 30 seconds, they perform lung function tests. So essentially in less than a minute, we actually measure around 12 health parameters, such as your temperature, blood pressure, ECG, oxygen saturation, heart functions, lung functions, everything. And all these data can then be used to actually measure the gradual progress of their condition, essentially trying to figure out how all these different parameters measured at the same time creates an index or kidney index, what we call. So this index can actually help determine where the patients are in their health. And also, this is not just for patients who are in their late stage chronic kidney disease, but also for patients who are in their end stage renal disease to manage their condition. And little going upstream, we're also looking into people who have diabetes or hypertension. And some of the markers that we have are something that is not even measured in diabetes or hypertension patients. So what we're really looking into is, in addition to measuring signs and symptoms like high blood pressure, dyspnea or breathlessness, and changes in blood pressure or changes in heart and lung function, we also aim to emulate the CKD clinical evaluation strategy by providing a platform which offers a more holistic view of an individual's health, and also offering more as a clinical decision support tool. Essentially, what we have is a solution that is more like a check engine light for humans, especially for people who are going through chronic kidney disease, and also ultimately prevent this condition from occurring and help people like my mom and also caregivers like me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Satya. That's really helpful. And it's excellent to hear progress being made on that and why you've particularly gone down that route. So if I then can shift the same question to John. So John, with obviously Buzzfly Network, it'd be great to hear about, the reason why you've chosen on this disease state and the indication for the digital technology. and what is it in terms of the product representing a therapeutic breakthrough, and how significant was the level of unmet medical need?
Thank you very much. And I'm thrilled here to represent Butterfly, a transformative technology that, from my perspective, has the chance to really change healthcare in ways that we've not seen in a couple centuries. What Butterfly actually is a single probe whole body ultrasound system that essentially plugs into a smart device, fits into your pocket, is personally affordable, and enables a clinician, caregiver, or ultimately even a patient to scan themselves with an ultrasound device. All aspects of health are actually included. So every specialty from before you're born, actually to the latter stages of life, in every single care venue, imaging information is a powerful way to actually either identify disease, follow disease, and certainly guide us in clinical treatment of patients. Really interesting, all of Jonathan Rothberg's our founder, and all of his innovations have really been based on how do you actually transform healthcare by lowering the cost of care and addressing those issues of inequity. And really what drives the driving force behind Butterfly is the fact that 2/3 of the world today has absolutely no access to medical imaging. And why is that so important? Actually, if you look at when there is a diagnostic dilemma, do we not know exactly what's wrong with you? Up to 80% of the time, it's just simple imaging that answers those questions. And the way medicine has been practiced for centuries, it's always been, and whether you're a physician, a nurse, any kind of practitioner, it's history, physical, pause. And that pause is that point where we decide, do I know what's wrong with you? Do I not? And do I need more information? And the second we get to that, that's where, if you will, that inequity occurs around the globe, because not everyone has the same access to the right kind of information to make good clinical decisions. And what Butterfly has done is put in the hands of physicians and healthcare providers a tool that changes the way in which we practice medicine. So now it's history, physical, image, pause. And what happens there? What happens there is we have powerful information that transforms our clinical decisions and accelerates us on the journey to knowing what's wrong with you and actually get better faster. And I think that's really the essence of what we do. And if you look at the way Butterfly has been deployed around the world, from the far reaches of Africa, where recently we put in 500 probes in an area where we've never had imaging before. And now, if you think about the way women look at maternal fetal health in the developing world, while over here in this country, when someone gets pregnant, we're wondering, is it a boy or a girl, or what am I going to name them? Over there, they wonder, am I going to be alive to see my baby born? And is that baby going to live? Butterfly changes that. And that happened just recently, just last week, in a new program, a placenta previa, where a fatal condition, if undiagnosed, was diagnosed with a Butterfly in someone that just learned how to use this device. But part of the importance of this is also knowing that it's not just the technology. And the technology is transformative. Think about the way we've now put ultrasound on a chip, different than every other ultrasound device in the world. And if you would like an analogy that makes sense, it's simple to understand. When we put cameras on the chip, the world became photographers and became really good photographers. Well, what's happening now with Butterfly is all clinicians are becoming ultrasound experts over time. And so we're leveraging the device itself to make it affordable, versatile, and accessible, unprecedented versatility, the first and only whole body ultrasound system. But we're also leveraging artificial intelligence tools to make it easier to capture an image, to make it easier to interpret that image. And then we leverage a user interface that's the only medical device that's won an Apple Design Award for its simplicity, so that everybody can learn how to use this device. Everybody can then get that information. And whether you're in the most advanced health systems in the world, or the most remote regions of the world, or up on the space station where it exists today, or the sidelines of professional sports, or as we drive in our clinical studies in the home, imaging information to make better clinical decisions can be in the hands of everyone. And the sooner you have that information and the cheaper you have that information, healthcare becomes better for all. And we address that issue of inequity. So it won't be just those that can afford this device, expensive devices that exist today. Everyone can have this device.
Fantastic, John, and sounds like a hugely powerful tool that you developed there, and look forward to seeing the output of that. Very good. Thank you, John. Can I now move to Francois Henry for your opening statement and why you went down this route with Nova Discovery, please?
Sure. So we built Jinko as the world's first clinical trial simulation platform. And really the objective is to attack the root cause of the spiraling drug prices, which is effectively the way drug developers need many shots on goal to finally identify a drug and bring it to market and bring it to patients. And the root cause really is the lack of predictive capabilities throughout a drug candidate's journey. So you more often than not, if the compound is not failing for safety purposes, end up in late stage trial with a drug that might not be more efficient than the standard of care or the placebo. So when we embarked on the mission 12 years ago, we really wanted to be one of the agents of change towards a much more efficient research and development paradigm, and essentially instilling into what has been otherwise, for historical reasons, an R&D paradigm driven by experimental sciences to really infuse a bit of engineering mindset. So build disease models, and we have people tend to underestimate how much knowledge is out there in terms of our global understanding of a particular pathophysiology. And putting this into mathematical equations, which effectively makes this knowledge exploitable and available for simulation purposes, generate virtual patients, and therefore enable users of the Ginkgo platform to test any parameters tied to the design of an upcoming trial on human subjects, see what's the impact in terms of maximizing the outcome, i.e. providing truly innovative therapies to patients in need, and therefore adjust and go about running those conventional trials as a confirmation of what the platform has predicted in the first place, rather than using those trials as they are currently used for exploratory purposes to essentially sort through different assumptions. So this type of technology really will be transformational. It will make the whole R&D process much more efficient. It will reduce both financial but also ethical costs of exposing non-responding patients to drug candidates. So you should be able to anticipate this and avoid this at all costs, and make the entire process of hypothesis exploration much faster, because you're using a platform, you're running this. I mean, we last week in one of our ongoing projects, we ran a simulated phase 3 trial on 50,000 patients, testing 5 or 6 different arms, so 50 times those 5 or 6 arms, in order to come up with what would be the most efficient design. So it's much more efficient to explore those assumptions by computer simulation.
Brilliant. Fantastic. And we look forward to hearing more about that too. And then finally, Chrissa, last but not least, save patiently towards the end, would love to hear again, similar to all the others, your kind of reason for moving into this space and what the unmet need was.
Absolutely. Thanks, Harpreet. So Patient Tours is more of a software play. We're digital health. We're also the world's first health data wallet. So as you know, new regulations, October 6, 2022, was when the federal government passed the Patient Data Liberation bill. So now patients are empowered to receive electronic access to their information. And we've essentially, with our technology being Web3 based and decentralized, been ahead of a lot of the regulatory legislations that have been passed, because we saw the unmet need in, really having individuals control their data, and that how this essentially affected clinical trials recruitment. We started out, of course, with Moderna and the COVID-19 vaccine, and we quickly saw how we can use our platform, which aggregates, healthcare information, not only in a medical record, but now with wearable and medical devices, to really identify, those individuals that are great candidates, for these trials, which oftentimes, we see are unmet because of the time it takes to actually source these individuals, and the trust needed to also build the confidence when we start to talk about underserved communities and markets. So right now we recruit primarily in, focus on cancer and chronic disease states. So melanoma, for example, myofibrosis, And these are, I would say, much tougher populations to identify and go after, especially when you want to recruit for people of color. So it's from a social standpoint, we really saw the need in starting to educate but also empowering, the population with what it means to have access to their healthcare information, and how that is going to benefit them long term.
Brilliant, fantastic. Okay, well, look, that's a really good opening statement, and thank you all for sharing that. If I can just delve a bit deeper on that, and maybe Chris, I'll start with you. Obviously, you talk about the software play at Patientry. Can I ask? Sorry, I didn't come out there right. Can I ask a question on clinical outcomes? Because I think, from a patient's perspective, is there a measurable impact you can cite on clinical outcomes for patients with this product so far, or what's been the response from both clinicians and patients with the software? Oh, you're on mute. Sorry.
I kind of went on. Don't know how that. So we're hypothesizing that we're able to decrease new chronic diseases roughly by 15% just by having people access their information and start to learn and understand and get recommendations on diet and what they should be doing in terms of exercise, right, to minimize those risks of that, as well from a financial implication standpoint. With our POCs with like payers, we're also tracking adherence to care plan. So we really start to see how patient engagement plays a part in this, and how that can be essentially part of that daily routine, right, with an individual, as an emerging technology, which we've never really had a chance to do before. We have different products today on the market, but they weren't able to get as deep into merging these different types of information together to actually create a curated, personalized plan for that individual, as well as incentivizing them, right? We have some apps that are able to give them payments for walking 1,000 steps. We see this more of a ecosystem play with the wallet, right? Having that wallet available, that can also integrate with other aspects and other rewards and Visa, MasterCard, et cetera. So we're really driving down on the incentivization piece for that individual, which essentially will drive these long-term health outcomes.
No, wonderful. Thank you for that. And Francois Henry, if I can ask the same to you, obviously similar clinical simulation product that you have here. Have you seen also any measurable impacts on clinical outcomes for patients, and what's been the response from clinicians and patients?
Absolutely. So patients typically are not exposed to our trial simulation platform directly, obviously, but certainly we do work with clinicians to build and validate our disease models. So we initially were met with some skepticism, to put it mildly, that you could put human biology and its complexity into mathematical equations, but it is precisely because human biology is complex that in order to make sense of it, you need to have the rigor of mathematical formalism, so that you then have a model with which you can test multiple different assumptions. So what we are seeing from clinicians' response overall is a keen interest once they understand how we go about building those models. They are involved in the design of disease models depending on their area of expertise. And one of the things that usually comes up in the process is that we help them identify knowledge gaps or unknown unknowns, if you will, that actually potentially drive future research efforts in exciting areas where people actually did not suspect that there was a gap or something that need to be plugged. So we had very active participation from clinicians in our project so far. But again, after the initial skepticism. In terms of impacts, it's fairly straightforward, and I've sort of mentioned it before. As soon as you introduce more predictive capabilities into an R&D intensive industry, and pharma is the most R&D intensive industry globally, measured by the the amount being spent in R&D as a percentage of revenues, you become a much more efficient organization, and you bring more innovative products to market in a shorter time span, and obviously with less spending. So drastically reduced sample size to late stage trial is one of the outcomes that users of the Ginkgo platform can derive by identifying optimal responders before they actually run the trial in human subjects. That then gets baked into the inclusion-exclusion criteria, and you'll try to recruit the corresponding profiles in your trial, so you can mechanically reduce the sample size of your trial. It also reduces, as I briefly mentioned before, ethical costs. When you're inefficient at identifying the right responders for your drug product, you will try and enroll a sort of average population into your trial, and therefore run the risk of exposing non-responding subjects to your drug candidates. So that's also something that we're adjusting for. So overall impact in terms of ethical and financial costs and time to market approval, and obviously to patients.
Yeah. Okay. No, thank you for that. John, obviously you know, with your product, you've gone through the various stages of, design, trial, and then obviously market authorization into the hands of consumers. What challenges did your company confront when transitioning from, early proof of concept, ultimately getting it to the hands of clinicians on the front line?
Well, I think Butterfly's had the advantage of kind of the unmet need that all of us actually have experienced in our life, whether you've been to an emergency room, an urgent care clinic, or doctor's office. Maybe that parameter that's so rarely measured, but always felt, is that parameter that the impact that time has on your emotional state, of what it's like to actually worry about what's wrong with me and not knowing and waiting for a test result. And so that's been a huge part of what we've addressed with Butterfly. We literally conquered time. And so history, physical, image, I know what's wrong with you. It's been an amazing leap forward. So I think that's really been a big unmeasured and unmet need that we're addressing. And I think the other benefit Butterfly has is that there's so many years of data on ultrasound and its power in actually making a clinical diagnosis and leading to the right decisions, that we've been able to leverage that data and move forward. So it's not necessarily convincing people of the value proposition of ultrasound, because it's there. It's then also leveraging the information, and there's 10 years of ultrasound information for point of care showing how it speeds up those clinical decisions. And so we haven't had to overcome that hurdle. I think probably the biggest hurdle we've had to overcome is just fundamentally changing the way people practice medicine. We don't change easily in medicine. If you look at the number of years, and if you look at the data, anywhere from 15 to 20 years from the time a concept is proven until we completely pivot in that direction. I think that's probably the biggest challenge. We've got innovators that have led the pace. We're obviously the fastest growing handheld ultrasound company in the world, and so people are getting there. But physicians as a whole look at new technology, and we tend to be hesitant of saying, can I learn this? Can I apply it? And let's not understate the impact the pandemic has had for all of us. People are having to do more with less, faster. So it makes it harder to learn a new skill. What Butterfly's also addressed is, how do we make that easier? How do we chop it up into little bite-sized pieces so you don't have to learn all of ultrasound, which physicians typically think. When we go to them and say, okay, now you're going to be the one doing ultrasound. It's history, physical, you image. They think, I've got to learn everything there is to know about imaging the entire body. And you got to stop. No, it's not like taking medical school all over again. We're just going to teach you lung. You can learn lung ultrasound very quickly, within hours, and become good enough to recognize normal versus abnormal. And that can have such a tremendous impact on outcomes right away. So convincing people to learn that way. And we're very fortunate as well, because medical schools now all across the country are incorporating ultrasound into basic education. And medical schools now are getting Butterflies to every one of the students from the beginning. And so this next generation of students is going to be different. But I think the biggest hurdle Butterfly addresses is, oh my gosh, can I really learn this quickly? And we're answering that question, yes. And I'll add one more. Now, all of a sudden, hospital systems have a whole group of people that have Butterflies in their hand. They weren't used to that. So a big need that Butterfly responded to was building an ultrasound infrastructure so you could have security and data management and know exactly where all the things, and incorporate it into the EHR it's been an important second big step for Butterfly to take. And we're addressing all three of those in a very effective way. And I think that's what's slowing things down, not the recognition of the value that we bring to the table.
No, fantastic. That's really helpful. And obviously the upskilling and education part is critical in order to optimize use and make the most out of what we're delivering. Great. And Satya, I'm going to bring that question to you as well, because obviously, you know, with your solution and Ada Health and the Mouth Lab Vital Signs that you have, I'm assuming that you've gone through the same process of, you know, early proof of concept trials all the way to kind of market authorization. What challenges does your company confront when transitioning through that phase?
No, absolutely. I think if you look at a lot of competitors or like companies in this market, they took more of a platform type approach where you can add any kind of sensors or technologies, but we took the hardware or the harder route of going through and getting validation for medical technology. So for us, early understanding, because we use the power of breath and saliva, which is often a medium that is not depletable, easily accessible, and offers tremendous promise in terms of medical analysis, like doing biochemistry of breath and saliva. But also it's a challenge to help regulators understand how the device actually performs and how people actually use the device. So, I mean, even we also had challenges trying to educate physicians, because everyone starts talking about like how vital it is and what kind of parameters are measured, how close it is to the gold standards. So we had to go through several rounds of conversations with the FDA and other regulators. We started almost like 3-4 years in advance before our submission. Not to mention, we actually submitted during the peak pandemic in 2020, where we had so many challenges getting safety testing labs available for doing studies of patients for clinical trials, understanding the requirements of the FDA. But the greatest thing was FDA was very helpful throughout the process. What we had a different perspective, or every startup has a different perspective of the FDA, right? But we had a very different perspective. They understood our situation. They were helping us throughout the process. The second thing is in terms of understanding the usability of the device and also how patients are going to respond to this, right? So because the device is not really simple in terms of manufacturing, but actually the usability is fairly simple. Even changing a sensor a little bit, like 1 mm on the other side, actually impacts the accuracy of the device. So it took a lot of trial and error. Like this was probably the 6th version of our device. I've been working on it for almost 8 years. So finally getting and involving users from day one and then making sure we iterate the product throughout this journey was very helpful for us. And finally, the adoption of physicians, right? So the point where last year we got our FDA clearance, CE mark approval, ISO certification, MDSAP certification. We also got our HIPAA compliance and GDPR compliance. A combined package of all those things, what really got the physicians into trusting the product. And also, thankfully, we got an opportunity to work. We're working with BARDA, the US Department of Health, doing studies in partnership with the VA, also offered us additional validation, which actually is helping us today in terms of showing how this product could be very vital in not just measuring 1 or 2 parameters that might be remotely associated with somebody's health, but rather take a more holistic, multi-sensor biomarker approach so that we can provide a more holistic view. And also it helps patients, especially for CKD patients who don't even know that they have a condition until it's in the late stages. So a device like this would be an early indicator and also an effective management tool.
Yeah, absolutely. And through that, and any lessons from your experience and from what you just articulated, where, you know, that might be able to add to a better public understanding and awareness of the medicine innovation process? Because I think for many, it's difficult to understand, but through the lessons that you've learned from this experience, anything there that you want to share that could lead to better understanding?
Absolutely. I think one thing, as I touched upon earlier, is to have early conversations with the regulators. And most products today, like a lot of companies call themselves digital therapeutics, but I think they still don't have validated products in them. So it's essential to have an early conversation with the regulators, at least 3 years in advance before an actual submission, to better understand that process, and also involving users early in the process. It's not about building a technology and finding a problem to solve, but actually like solving a real world problem. So we actually were part of a lot of sessions with patients, regulators, with providers. More important, so like they reimburse this technology, they actually support adoption of this technology. So we went through a lot of understanding from that perspective, and ultimately what it led us position to actually present our technology. We don't have to go back and fix anything else. Our only objective now is to actually take this to millions of patients who need this technology. So I would say ensuring that you have a proper path, both for regulatory and reimbursement, early in the game would be very helpful before even starting commercialization efforts.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Satya, and thank you all our panelists for that rich discussion. I'd like to just remind our attendees on this webinar who've joined us, please do ask questions to the nominees through the question and answer function, and I'll appropriately ask those individuals. But why don't I open up for a group discussion now, because I think each of us have presented our particular software or product that we have, but also the similarities and the overlap that we have in terms of the process we've got to from concept all the way to kind of getting it into frontline or into the hands of the patients. So if I can ask by just opening up, which again is to all of you, is as scientists and innovators, where do you see the next wave of innovation trending in your individual product area? So why don't I start with John? Obviously, you miniaturized as much as you can with the ultrasound and you've got this chip. Where do you see the next kind of wave of innovation in your particular area?
Well, I think one of the beauties for us, and I think a unique feature of what we've had is that, and step back for a moment and see how being on a silicon chip has transformed almost every business and entity it's ever been in. You take advantage of Moore's law, you see the evolution of where a chip can take you, and our founder, who is also responsible for next generation DNA sequencing, you see where that actually led. So whenever you can leverage the silicon industry and use a computer chip, it just completely transforms the future. And so for us, we're not going to be limited just by a probe. It's going to be much smaller form factors, patches, wearables, all of that is in the future. So you leverage the power of ultrasound imaging. And I think that's one innovation that's clearly coming toward the future. The second thing is the power of artificial intelligence tools, machine learning tools, to make it easier to both capture and interpret those images, and to look beyond what we've been historically been able to see in a pretty picture and what does that picture show us, to transitioning to what's in that sound data behind the picture, that using these tools they can see something that none of us have ever imagined seeing before, and connecting the dots between that information and the pathology and outcomes so that we can better advance along the way. And I think the next thing that's going to evolve is the whole education process, that this is going to be a core aspect of what we do. And then the final one I'll say is care is moving toward the home. Care is moving to the left of the care continuum. And so, the lovely innovations that we're seeing today, and actually all of these actually play into that, is the power of the earlier that we can get a diagnosis to start treatment, and the sooner we can get people out of the hospital and taken and managed in the home. Healthcare is better and stronger if we do that. Patients are happier, and then we can leverage those very restricted resources at expensive institution for only those that are the most sickest that need it. And so whether any of these innovations is driving us in that direction, and particularly Butterfly, I think that's the future that I see in front of us.
Yeah, wonderful. And Chris, same question to you, because obviously you're focused on a niche area, and obviously developing the software, including how do you make it inclusive and reach out to a wide ranging population. Where do you see the innovation coming in your particular area?
Absolutely. And we can even look at current market trends, right? With acquisitions and big tech companies like Amazon with One Medical, there's definitely a greater push for consumerism and transparency across all boards in the ecosystem. That's price transparency, data transparency. And with this push to consumerism, we're seeing a more patient-centric focus. And I think, this is also where we step in being able to help to empower individuals with that information. So we're definitely going to start to see more personalized care, right? Which is going to boil down to people being, incentivized to make healthier choices. And overall, we're going to see more of that ownership boil down to that individual, right? So current marketplaces that exist today, when we look at how healthcare information is handled from a B2B perspective, we're going to start to see that open up to where now individuals can actually, be compensated for their information that they create on a daily basis. So I think, that's where that push is going to go when we talk about price transparency and consumerism.
Yeah. And is that, when you think about price transparency, is that a big shift that you're seeing now increasingly in the area that you're operating in? Is that driven by both consumers, but also from healthcare providers?
Yes, also healthcare providers, but also new regulations as well. Right. That's calling for, in the payer system, ecosystem, price transparency around, different costs of services. And I think the new models that are emerging in technology, when we think about telemedicine, et cetera, is driving us to reach to that level, especially with the larger organizations like we have like Walmart that are now, they're charging for different medical services. You can go in and see a primary care specialist for, I believe, like $50. So that's all part of that disruption as well in the industry.
Yeah, excellent, wonderful. Françoise, Henry, for you, I want to ask about the new areas of application for digital technologies, especially to fight disease and think about patient outcomes. Which new areas are exciting you most in terms of new applications in this space?
So in terms of trends in our particular space, what I see is convergence between the models that are built with the Jinko platform based on sort of our collective understanding of the various processes implicated in a particular disease, and AI-driven models, and at both ends of the spectrum. So in early discovery, providing an interpretability layer to insights generated with AI models to reduce the risk of a drug developer embarking on a 15-year program with potential billions invested on the basis of spurious correlations. And it's very hard to disentangle, to separate the wheat from the chaff when you're only looking at correlation-based models, especially in human biology. At the other end of the spectrum, these predictive algorithms combining mechanistic representations, so therefore causal representations with AI-generated insights, will find their way eventually into personalized medicine. Personalized medicine to predict a particular patient's response to any available drug that's out there for the disease of interest. Right now, AI applied to diagnostics is starting to prove its case, effectively working, but using only AI models to predict the response to treatments, including some that just arrived on the market for which you have limited access to data because the data is just not there in the first place. You'll need this convergence between mechanistic models and AI to happen.
Got it. And for you, Satya, from your perspective, obviously you're focusing on particular disease areas. How do you see that evolving in the application of your technology across different disease areas?
Absolutely. No, I can look at it as two different perspectives, from wellness or disease management, right? So there's going to be a push towards not just measuring health or actually reporting information, but actually towards changing behaviors. A lot of companies are taking this effort in terms of how can we present the data, how can we take approaches to change an individual's behavior, because most of these like major conditions like hypertension, diabetes, or obesity, and others are lifestyle related conditions, and oftentimes we really focus on more reactive approach. So I look at providing technologies to not just educate but also empower individuals is the direction. And I definitely know AI and technologies are there. There's and we are working towards breath and saliva, so that's also something that we're really looking into as a future because of the access to millions of other biomarkers. But from a clinical trial perspective, if I really look at it, there's a lot of platforms that are out there, there are a lot of technologies that are out there that are presenting, that are accessing or used as a data collection tool. I really think, at least from our perspective, what we really think is clinical trial management and platforms should really start focusing on actually seeing data, like actually understanding where the direction in which the trials are going with actually real-time data. So that's where we think there's going to be more devices and technologies that are going to be part of decentralized or virtual or hybrid trials, where it's not going to be just presenting data and then collecting it just from an FDA perspective, but also helping the sponsors and also the trial organizations to really understand how to better manage their trials, how to better understand which patient population are getting benefited from this, so that we don't wait till the end of the trial to actually understand what's happening with it. So for us, it's an intersection. I think there's going to be, all the lines are going to be a little bit blurred as we move forward in terms of disease management versus clinical trials versus wellness. But what we really look into is how can technologies, validated technologies, can leverage this movement towards care at home is what is going to be the next big thing.
Yeah. And do you envision then that, more people, citizens, patients, the public, sign up to clinical trials if they're going to be more in the community or more in their homes, or are there other barriers that we need to address in order to get people in clinical trials? And maybe one for you, and then maybe I'll come to Chris on that same question.
Yeah, absolutely. I think definitely privacy has been a biggest challenge for people more than anything. But doing studies at home, bringing technologies, bringing people home, acts definitely from in terms of ensuring comfortness and also access to information. It has definitely helped. So home-based clinical trial would definitely expand the number of patients or people who sign up. But unless and until we don't have strict policies and to ensure that their data and their privacy is upheld, it's going to be a little bit still challenging for adoption of clinical trials at home.
Yeah. And Carissa, any thoughts on that from the lens you have in terms of engaging more patients, public onto clinical trials? Oh, I think Carissa might well be frozen. John, can I bring you then in? I mean, from your experience, you've obviously had, but working both in the US and more globally, are you finding that engaging patients from diverse backgrounds and thinking about trial participants, we're seeing a rise, or are you seeing there's still challenges that need to be addressed?
No, I think it is. I think that the fascinating thing, and I think we've touched on the surface of this, is there's going to be a percentage of the population that will embrace this and embrace this quickly. And we've certainly seen the generation of people that understand digital technology run to it and make it much easier to use. But you also look at this and you understand the behaviors that are driving health. We know, for instance, that cigarette smoking causes cancer and major lung problems, yet people continue to smoke. We know, for instance, the issue that we have with obesity, and it's linked to diabetes, yet obesity is actually growing around the world, and particularly in the United States. And so I think what the future lies is, how do we take digital technology and the tools that people are inventing here, couple them with what we've learned in behavior science, and begin to change behaviors. It has to be a big part of what we do in the future, because unless the behaviors change, and unless we get good compliance, all the wonderful technology in the world is still just going to be, cleaning up after the flood rather than preventing the flood. And I think that's really a lot of where the future is going to go. And I think what you're seeing here is more and more devices that are empowering patients, giving them the information to try to drive them with information to change the way they behave. And if we're really going to have an impact, that has to be a key part of what we do in the future.
Hi, Chris, you're back. I was asking the question about involving patients on trials and how to engage them. And are you still seeing challenges there when engaging patients in different ways?
Yeah, no, we definitely see it's a challenge. It's one of the biggest, challenges that, clinical research organizations, CROs and pharma faces today. And I would, just to follow on with John, and what we've seen is also education is a big piece, right? Which we don't have today. And if we take, a page out of, other industries such as social media, when we talk about engagement, a lot of that boils down to messaging, right? And the different tools, whether that's video, snippets, to really grab the attention of that individual to really bring across key, succinct, messaging points that can help them towards a certain action. And it's gamification, right? And it is a lot of behavioral science and testing that out. By the end of the day, what we've seen is that if we're able to empower, those patients through education, through building awareness and education through trust, then we're going to get, the optimal outcome there.
Got it. The trust element seems to be coming up time and time again, and I think that's just a conversation that might have been amplified with various events over the last few years in particular. But are there still challenges we're facing with trust, with the use of a lot of the technologies and product? And are there any things we can do to alleviate those concerns? Anyone want to take that? Maybe I'll come to Satya.
Sorry, repeat the question for a second.
The question around trust. So are we finding it difficult? Because patients want to trust, clinicians want to trust. The trust issue keeps coming up time and time again. But anything we can do to alleviate concerns when it comes to trust, and how do we build that trust and confidence?
I think from our perspective, we wanted to talk about how we ensure the trust is in terms of regulatory buy-in, like in terms of if this technology or if a study or if a clinical trial, who is sponsoring that study, who is involved in that study, and is it coming from their physician, is very critical for patients to get that value. And another thing that we have seen is in terms of recommendation from family members or friends is also something that has actually showed that, hey, there is some level of validation that this technology or this study is actually bringing in. So for us, showing any prior examples of such kind of efforts from such organizations have shown to actually change patients' perspective. But oftentimes it comes down to how the harm is communicated, how transparent the sponsors are, or even the technology providers are, is really critical, because the transparency of information, even if it means having all these contraindication, all these challenges, presenting it upfront is very essential, and which is what is going to actually help alleviate that concern and ensure that more people trust these technologies because of the fact that they are transparent.
I think this is a particularly difficult time for trust, from what we've gone through with the pandemic and all the different things that we unfortunately have added an element in medicine that we've just not seen before. And I think it's always been, if we're upfront with all of the available data, if we remain united, even in debate, that you can have fair and honest debate about stuff, particularly as you're innovating, because there are unanswered questions when you innovate. They just are. That's the nature of innovation. And I think we have to be honest and open about that. And we have to be honest and open about when we've made mistakes. If we really want to earn everyone's trust again, we have to be transparent in that regard. And I think some of the tools we have here, if we're transparent in what they do and what they can't do and not overstate what they're available, I think we have a much better chance of gaining the public's trust again. They want to trust us. They need to trust us. We just need to make it easier and safer for them to do so.
Got it. Okay. Now let's make this the final question then, and it's been again hugely rich discussion. I can't believe the time's gone so quickly, but here we are. But look, let's make this the final question. And obviously, being the Galien Awards, it is what I want to do is ask each of you the question of what kind of innovations might the Galien Awards Committee be reviewing in your field 5 years from now? Let me start with Francois Henry first.
Well, I think I've actually mentioned this before, but the space that I can talk about, which is the trial simulation space, the natural evolution will be to find some of these algorithms and virtual avatars. They have a widespread application in personalized medicine. So eventually solutions that really help predict a particular patient's response to any available treatments would be something that still today is science fiction, but hopefully 5 years from now we'll be closer to having market applications.
Wonderful, thank you. John.
Well, it's a hard one, but I'm going to say that what we're going to do, and I'll use ultrasound as the platform, where you don't have to be an expert to perform an ultrasound. You don't have to have an image to actually look at, that there will be devices that will actually capture this information and not only identify a disease state, predict it, exactly what its natural history is going to be, and suggest the right possible outcomes. And I think it will come in very many different forms, but I think that's where the future lies.
Yeah, brilliant. Chrissa?
Yeah, I'm going to say we're going to see more solutions and applications as it relates to AR, VR, and the metaverse. So looking at digital twins and essentially how we can use, I know Francois mentioned avatars, to also simulate, what affects certain, vaccines or certain therapeutics will have. And I think we'll be able to do those simulations in the metaverse.
Great. And finally, Satya.
Yeah, I think I want to be selfish here, but essentially what we're really looking into technologies like medical tricorders, right? I don't know how many of you are Star Trek fan, but if there is a technology that can measure somebody's overall health and then actually rely the information, especially technologies that does not require any form of human intervention, something that people don't even need to be a medical professional to understand their health, is what we believe is a true innovation, something what most of us in this panel are doing today. And we believe that 5 years from now, these technologies are going to be far more advanced so that we ensure only people who absolutely need care in the hospital will be in the hospital, whereas everybody else stays home. And more importantly, have a healthy lifestyle, which is going to be a huge factor to actually change the real culture of monitoring health.
Got it. Wonderful. Well, thank you. Thank you all. So I would just like to wrap up by saying thank you again for all of you joining today and for representing your companies and the great work that you've all been doing. Just to let everyone know that this webcast is viewable on the Galien Foundation's homepage, and importantly, Thursday's Jubilee Forum, which will begin at 7:30 a.m., will include CEO keynote followed by a presentation of the winner at 6:30, and then ending with the awards dinner. So wishing you all a very good luck. And again, thank you for joining us today and sharing your insights and your valuable contributions that you've made. Thank you again.
Thank you.